Hey, what's up everybody? So today I wanted to do one of these sort of what's in my bag type videos, and the reason I want to do that is that I find them particularly helpful for people to learn from, and I learned a lot in watching those whenever I was younger when I was starting out. And so I wanted to say first off that I'm actually in between camera systems. And what I mean by that is that I started out on Nikon crop sensor DSLRs for a really long time. Had a D500 up until very recently. And I kind of had a mix of DX crop sensor lenses as well as quite a few full frame lenses. And I realized in using my full frame lenses on my film cameras and such that I was actually missing out on a lot of the capability of those lenses. And so I went and got a Nikon D800. And I quite like that camera, the resolution, the images themselves, I really was a fan, and so I've sort of shifted my focus a little bit. And so that said, the first thing that I wanted to show that I actually still have two lenses for crop sensor that I will be selling here shortly. The first one is the 35 1.8, and the second one is sort of the 55 to 300, and this is sort of like the cheapest telephoto zoom lens that you can get. And basically I choose to use something like this. I throw it into my travel bag because I don't really want something heavier and such. Maybe one of these days I'll get something, you know, a little better for the full frame for that. Now, in using the D800, I realized that I quite like the files from the D800, and I decided that I didn't really need the fast action capability of the D500. It's a very great camera and it can do basically anything, but I was leaning more towards, you know, higher resolution, landscape photography, that sort of thing. From time to time I do some portraits. However, I find myself, you know, not really needing the full capability of the D500. On top of that, I decided that with all the, you know, mirrorless cameras coming out and things like that, that if I was going to have a crop sensor, it needs to be significantly smaller and lighter than other full frame offerings on the market. So one of these days I may pick up a very small crop sensor camera. However, it's going to have to be significantly smaller than the Nikon Z6 II that I recently replaced my D500 with. That's what's filming now. I will show it a little later in the video. But I got the Z6 II as well as the 24 to 70 f4 lens, and we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so being that I have quite a few full frame Nikon f mount lenses, I decided that I should get a replacement to my D800. I was pretty happy with the D800, but there was one feature in particular that made me decide that I would like to get a D810 or a D850. And that really comes down to the low ISO. And so the D810 has a 64 ISO, and that's something that I really appreciate. If I could get something even lower, I would. I use that more than anything. I try to keep base ISO whenever possible, and it helps to not have to use a not have to use like a neutral density filter in certain situations and things like that as well. So I find that to be a really helpful feature. The D800 you can get around $600. So if you're looking for a full frame higher ISO or high resolution camera, the D800 is a good option. The D810 costs a little more than that. You can get them somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 or more. However, I paid a little extra to get one that was really clean, and I paid extra to be able to order it to the middle of nowhere, so I couldn't really go around checking out private parties, that sort of thing. So basically, what I ended up doing, I got the D810, and that's to be able to natively use all my lenses that I have left, and so that's really nice. I'm also comparing it against the Z6 II, and in the next year I will decide which one I'm going to keep, which one I'm going to sell. If not, maybe I'll sell both of them, who knows. I have a little bit of a benefit in living in Peru that the prices here are generally higher. So when I go home to visit, if I swap out or buy something, I can usually get my money back when I come back to Peru. So that's quite helpful for me. So I have sold off quite a few of my f-mount lenses over the last year or two, and this is basically what I have left. And the reason for me to do that is that I needed to consolidate my gear into basically 1 or 2 camera bags. That makes it much easier for me. And so I've got a little bit of a collection here. I've got a little bit redundancy here, and that was because I bought the 50 to test out my D810 when I was in the US, and I didn't have another lens with me. So the the 50 that I got here is the 1.4G, and I quite like it so far. However, one of my favorite lenses of all time is another 51.4. This is the AIS version, and I quite like it. This one has autofocus, this one doesn't. So one of these two will sell in the near future once I get to comparing them a little better. So the next one that I have is the 85mm 1.8D. I don't know if this is going to be the best 85 to use. However, I have been using it a while. The reason I say that is that I bought this lens because I had a Nikon F3 film camera that I wanted to be able to use it with, and I've currently decided not to keep a film camera on hand. So at the moment, I don't really need the D lens. I also have a 105 2.8 macro lens, and this one's been great. The price is really low for this one. This is the D version, and so if you're looking for an inexpensive macro lens for Nikon or to adapt, this is a really good option. I quite like it. The last thing that I have is sort of a inexpensive, faster telephoto. It's a 70 to 210 made by Vivitar, and it's 2.8 to f4. So variable aperture depending on your zoom range. So it's a pretty good lens to have that functionality when you don't want to pay the big money for an expensive, f2.8 for example. One of these days I would like to probably get something better to replace this. However, that's pretty much my f-mount kit right now, and so that's where I'm starting at from scratch. Like I said, one of these camera bodies will be gone, and I will consolidate my lenses from there. The reason that I've done this, like I said, one of these days I would like to get a crop sensor or some other travel camera. However, it would have to be significantly smaller than the Z6 II that I'm filming this with, and so I will be on the lookout for that. When I'm considering a camera system, I find it very important to also consider the lenses. Some of the Z-mount lenses are, just in my opinion, too expensive or too big for what they are. I mean, the 51.8 is supposed to be fantastic. However, it's huge compared to, a 50mm. This is what traditionally a 50mm would look like. That's not the case on the Z-mount. And so that's something that I'm not really happy about when you're considering a travel camera. Alright, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is lighting. I do not have really anything for continuous lighting besides the cheap ring flash that I'm using now for this video. I did pick up a set of Studio strobes with 2 stands, and I do have radio trigger for those. However, you do have to control the settings on the device itself, and the other thing is that it has a modeling lamp built in. However, it's not strong enough to run that as your sole source of lighting for video, for example, for continuous lighting. So this setup is very good. I bought those inexpensively locally, and then I had a friend that gave me a couple of Godox flashes a couple years ago, and he gave me 2 of the TT685 for Nikon. And those are quite nice. However, the problem that I had was I had to put one on top of the camera to trigger the other one, And so really it was sort of waste because I wouldn't use the flash on top of the camera really, I would only use it to control the other one. So in order to allow me to use two camera or flashes off camera via radio, I bought instead this X Pro unit by Godox to control those. So now I can put this smaller, lighter setup on top of the camera, and I can control the functions for the two flashes from here. So that makes it very nice, not a lot of running around whenever I'm setting up for portraits or something like that. So that's basically where I'm at now. And you know, like I said, I am in between systems right now. Those two crop sensor lenses that I have left are going to leave here in the near future. I will choose one of the 50 millimeters, depending on which one I like better, as well as you know, going forward, I will be choosing the two systems, so either the F-mount system or the Z-mount system. The D810 will likely eventually get replaced with the D850 if I decide to go that route, or I would get something else on the Z-mount side. Problem that I have is the Z-mount lenses are typically, you know, very expensive or quite large comparatively. Sometimes that's not the case, and I hope moving forward they will concentrate more on that, because what's the benefit in a smaller, lighter camera system if the lenses are going to be bigger? I mean, altogether with the Z-mount, I mean, it's only 20-30% smaller at most than, you know, a D810, for example. So I hope in the future that will, you know, be remedied with smarter lens designs. So that being said, I will choose lenses depending on those features, you know, going forward. So check back in about a year or so, and I'll let you guys know, you know, what I ended up doing and what route I'm going to end up taking if you're interested in that. I also wanted to mention that I do have a few reflectors here. I have a 5-in-1 reflector, a sort of more normal but larger reflector here, and a cover that can go over top of a flash unit, and it's a diffuser, so that's very nice to just put over top of the head of your flash and get a nice diffused light from that. That can be very helpful in some situations. And I do want to mention that I do have a set of rechargeable AA batteries. I have about 15 of those, and I use those to run the flashes as well as the X Pro trigger and whatever else I can, you know, run with those. And it's always important to carry some, you know, external hard drives, portable drives, that sort of thing. I don't have anything special on that. Yeah, so I think that's really about it. Take care, guys, and I'll talk to you later.